Hello, and welcome to my kitchen. My name is Ridley, and this is my kitchen, how I found it. We are going to be moving into our new country today, which is going to be Iran, and we're going to be trying a couple of dishes from around the Persian Gulf, and today we're going to the Gilan Province, I think I said that right, in which we are going to be trying a dish that goes back, the earliest recorded mention of it is in a book from 1881. And the dish itself is called Fesenjan, or Fesenjan, depending on pronunciation and dialects. This is fascinating for me because oftentimes when you're making a stew or a soup, which is kind of what this is, it's a thicker stew, you will thicken it with either a starch or flour, is what I'm familiar with. And in this case, it is a chicken stew, but it is going to be thickened with walnuts. And so we of course have the chicken. That's going to be bone-in, skinless chicken thighs. Now those ones right there, it's not something that you would normally find in this exact situation because I was able to find boneless, skinless, and I was able to find bone-in, skin on. But you can just grab some thighs. It's very easy to pull the skin off of it, and you've got your bone-in, skinless chicken thighs. The walnuts, you can either do what I've done here, which is I had some walnuts on hand, I threw them in a food processor and just ground them up. You want them to be a coarse grind because if you go too much, you can actually end up making walnut butter, and you don't want to release those oils and make a paste out of it. You can also, if you want to skip this step entirely, pick up walnut meal. And so walnut meal is oftentimes in baking aisles. It still has all the oils in it. It's a nice finely ground walnut as opposed to walnut flour where the oil has been removed. So that is going to be our thickening agent for the stew instead of any kind of starches or flour. Then on top of that, as far as the spices and flavors go, we're going to have a little bit of cinnamon, a little bit of turmeric, and a little bit of saffron threads that I've ground into a powder here. We're going to bloom those in a second, which is just you add them to a touch of water and it allows the flavor to seep into that and be spread out more evenly because you do not use a lot of saffron at all. You want just a little bit there. And then on top of that, we have some onions, which are going to add a little bit of sweetness, and we're going to caramelize those down a bit to add just a little bit of that sort of richer caramely flavor. A very interesting ingredient here, which is going to add some tart and sourness to it, which this is pomegranate molasses. I was worried that this was going to be a little harder to find, but it wasn't too bad. But this right here, you can substitute potentially by getting pomegranate juice and cooking it down. But if you can get the molasses, it wasn't too difficult for me to find. Lastly, we've got a tiny bit of sugar here if we need to sweeten it up a little bit because the molasses can be pretty dark. And to top it off, we've got a little bit of pomegranate arils, which we're going to put over the top. It's going to add a really nice pop of color, and also is going to add that really kind of juicy, crunchy texture at the very end. So that is the basis for our Fesenjan. And what's really cool about this one is all of these ingredients, aside from removing the skin from the chicken thighs, can be bought in this format. So already everything is ready for us to move over to the stove. We're going to start by toasting us up some walnuts so that we can use those natural oils and get that roasty, warm, nutty flavor. And then from there, we're just going to slowly build this dish and make ourselves a super tasty stew. So give us a couple seconds. We're going to move back to the stove and I'll see you there. For step one, we're going to start by toasting up the walnuts. Now, I've seen in different recipes the walnuts get added at different times. However, I do like the idea of doing this kind of dry roasting first because it really allows you to get those aromatics going from it. So we're going to knock this one up to a medium-low heat. We're going to add these ground walnuts, and then we just want to continuously stir for a few minutes while it's starting to heat up and while the toasting is occurring, because you do not want to burn them, but at the same time you also want to make sure that all of the walnuts get toasted. So what you're going to be looking for is, I guess, less looking and more smelling. You want that kind of nutty aroma to come out, and there might be a little darkening of the walnuts, but you don't want them to be like super browned. So this will take a few minutes, but just be patient. And definitely stick by the oven because burning them is something you can't come back from, and it will happen very quickly when it does happen because you're in a dry pan. So this has been going for probably 7 or 8 minutes now. I've got a really nice toasty aroma to it, but things have not burned at all, and it may have darkened a tiny bit, but I wouldn't use that as your determinant for when it's gonna be done. So now that we've got that really nice roasty aroma going on, we're just gonna pull this right off the heat and set it off to the side here until we need it in a couple of steps. Then we can move this right up here. And so for this one, you just wanna have a nice heavy bottom pot or Dutch oven, something that's got a lid to it, but also is gonna retain heat pretty well. I'm gonna put a little bit of olive oil in here, turn the heat up, and then once this is shimmering, which will take just a couple of seconds, we're going to add our onions in, and then we're gonna cook those until they start to brown and caramelize. It's gonna take us a couple of seconds here for this to come up to temp, but you wanna make sure that the oil is nice and shimmering and hot before you get all that in, and it'll get your cooking off right. I'm gonna go ahead and rinse this off so that I can just use the same tool. There we are, all right, we've got a little bit of shimmering in the oil. Nice sizzle. And we're just gonna cook these ones for a few minutes. And in this case, we do want some nice browning to it because we want that caramelization to really start. So in this case, you're looking for the beginning of that browning before we start adding in some spices. While this is browning, I'm just gonna prep some water, which is gonna go in right after we sear off the chicken. So in this case, it's gonna be a few cups. It's gonna kind of be the basis for the stew. So we started to get a little bit of browning, but I want a little bit more complete browning on everything. So a little more time in there, but it's already begun. Okay, so because all of the pieces have started to brown a little bit, I don't want them to get super, super dark at this point. I'm going to add our turmeric and give this a quick stir in and get it nice and fragrant, which should just take a minute or so. Also is gonna add a really beautiful color. Ooh, maybe even less than a minute, just a few seconds at this temp. All right, now we are going to add our chicken and just let it sear for a couple of minutes on each side here, so we can add it directly in with the onions. And we'll do some continuous stirring in there as well to make sure that we don't let it burn any of the onions or the chicken. But this is just to get an initial cook done. And then once that searing is done, we'll add the water on top, bring it to a boil, and then just let that cook for about 10 minutes or so. So at this point, we're just looking for a little bit of color and the initial cook on the chicken. So I'm gonna try and get it under some of these onions. We'll give that a couple of minutes. I'll do another stir and turn, a couple more minutes. All right, so we've got some browning to the chicken. Definitely make sure you're paying attention for those onions on the bottom because you don't want those to stick. But at this point, we're now going to add some water, just enough to cover the chicken. Maybe a little more. And then we are going to bring this mixture up to a boil, reduce the heat to a simmer, and then let it sit like that, like I was saying, for 10 minutes. And that's gonna be our initial cook on the chicken. So right now, we're just gonna let it come to a boil, reduce heat, let it simmer for 10 minutes. Now, as a fun little fact here, we're using chicken for this dish. However, the traditional version would have used wild duck, which was super, super present in the area where it came from. And there are also a ton ton of other varieties that don't use walnuts. So there's some that use beans, there's some that use, I think, yogurt, there was eggplant. So the recipe book that listed this one in 1881 had a ton of varieties of it. It's just that the walnut version is the one that's probably the most well known and has survived the longest and has become sort of associated with the dish. All right, and while it's coming up to a boil here, I'm going to add the ground cinnamon. Give this a nice mix in so that that flavors everything while it's cooking. There we are. We've got that nice rolling boil. So now I'm going to reduce the temperature. We're going to let that come down to a simmer, and then we'll let that simmer for 10 minutes. Chicken has finished its simmering for 10 minutes. So now we are going to pull the chicken pieces out and set them aside for now. And then we are going to add our walnuts into this mixture. And then we're going to let the walnuts cook down for an hour. Now, during that time, in order to make sure that it doesn't burn to the bottom or stick to the bottom, you do want to occasionally come back in and give it a nice stir and just make sure everything is not adhering anywhere. And during that time, the walnuts are supposed to thicken and darken into a really nice sauce. So we're going to add these in. Give that a stir. Get it to a nice simmer again, and then just a nice slow cook for the next hour. All right, this is going to be probably the longest period of time in this one. Just make sure you don't forget, because you don't want to end up with burned walnut sauce, because again, that will be unrecoverable from, so wish us luck. So this has been cooking for an hour now. It is significantly thickened and darkened. And it smells really sort of warming. The cinnamon and the nuttiness have really come out a lot, which almost to me feels sort of desserty. So I'm excited to see how this goes into a savory flavor. Now we are going to take our ground saffron from earlier and just add a little bit of water to it. And that is going to help us disperse it throughout the dish. I'll let that chill for just a second here. And then into our mix, gonna add a little bit of sugar here. Now, if you use a yellow onion instead of a white onion, you can reduce the amount of sugar a little bit. Alternately, if you want to have a little bit more of that sort of caramely flavor, you could use brown sugar. I saw in a few different recipes, and that's going to add more of that kind of molassesy tone to it. We're also going to add some of our pomegranate molasses. Now, I'm not going to add all of this because I want to make sure that I have some room at the end to be able to adjust the tartness and sourness if I need to. So I'm just going to add most of that in. I will leave the rest there. Let's do a little mix to make sure all of the saffron is in there. And then right into the mixture as well. Oh. And already that's really rapidly adjusting the scent of this as that pomegranate diffuses through it. And you've got that little bit of floral tone from the saffron. Oh, that's fascinating. All right. Take care of this over here. Now, we are going to take our chicken that's just been off to the side right here, add this back into the stew. And I'm going to add in the rest of those juices. Get this nicely covered. And then we're going to put the lid back on, and we're going to let this simmer for an additional 45 minutes, or until the chicken is just completely fallen off the bone. It should be super, super tender, and theoretically therefore easy for us to pull the bones out when we're actually cooking it or eating it. All right, so back on, timer again, 45 minutes. All right, so the stew thickened up considerably during the last 45 minutes, and the chicken is definitely super, super tender. We've served it right here with just some rice. So, as a note, normally this would be served with, you can do with yogurt, or the type of rice that's commonly served with this is another dish called tarig. But, as a heads up, we're making that next week as our dish for Iran week 2. So we can't make it this week because then I would have practice.
Right, and that kind of defeats the point of, figuring it out.
Yeah, trying it. So, pomegranates on top. We've got the Fesenjan stew over here, and rice, and...
Let's give it a shot.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's very interesting.
That cinnamon comes out really good.
And
it's not too much, but...
I was worried it was going to be kind of sour, and there is a little bit of tanginess, but it's not sour. I didn't end up actually adding any more of the additional pomegranate molasses, so there's a little less than a cup in here. Some recipes I saw went as high as a cup and a half, so almost double what was in here, and I think that might have been too much.
It is very potent, so I'm just going to spread it around more of this rice here. It's good, though. The sourness is a weird
It's kind of sour, kind of savory.
Yeah.
I haven't actually tried it with the chicken yet, so...
Well, let's give that a shot.
And when you get a pomegranate seed in there, a pomegranate aril,
yeah,
the burst of sweetness,
it really plays off of that sourness too. And the chicken is super tender. It just kind of came straight off with the fork. So.
This is so interesting, because there's not a lot of spices or things going on in here. And yet everything is sort of melded into some middle ground of all of it that, aside from the cinnamon, which until you pointed it out, I wasn't even thinking about it, but I would have...
It's present.
It's very present.
This is delicious.
It's very interesting. I think one thing that I would change next time is I would probably go for the walnut meal, or try to get the walnuts a little bit smaller, because there are some larger walnut chunks in there. They're easy to chew through, so it's not really a problem, but I could imagine it being more of like a stew texture.
To be fair, it doesn't really bother me. Honestly, I didn't really notice it until you mentioned it. So that's good for me. Like, you might be right. Texture, it probably will change, but it's fine as it is too.
And I could also see, because serving this with yogurt would have that like creamy, kind of like when we did the Turkish manti, and you have a little bit of savory alongside the super tangy creaminess of the yogurt. It might be too much though. I would say that would have to be something a little bit on the side to like dip into, as opposed to having it as a sauce over the top. But the chicken's delicious.
Those pomegranates are so good.
And having that extra little juicy burst is super tasty.
Yeah.
This is one I would be incredibly interested to try a restaurant version of, to see how it compares. Because this is such a different, warm,
rich, sort of savory meets tangy flavor that
Yeah,
I've
the
definitely
tang-
never experienced.
The tang is really weird in a good way. It's just definitely not something that I'm really used to.
Yeah.
Like the soury tang. And you said that was from the molasses?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well,
All right.
yeah, well, this will do it.
Absolutely. So, preview for next time, we're going to be trying tart, which is going to be a mostly rice dish, and we'll find something to go alongside it. But this is super tasty, and I can only imagine would be tastier with even more flavor in the rice. But by itself, it's still super good.
Oh, yeah. See you next time.